Okay, I'm going to talk to you as an industry about sanitation of machines. Some of you expressed your concerns about carnal bunt. I've got some other issues that's a little bit more potent than that. And you may be getting into it. And so there's going to be some new words that I'm going to throw out here as we get into this presentation. And again, I'm speaking to you as an industry, and not because I work with Case IH. Sanitation, there are no known standards. There are no known regulations. And there are people today attempting to do that. Carnal Bunt's pretty well got their shit together. But there are others in the industry that do not. Some of these words: amphotericin, amphotericin B. I'll mention these words later. Cryptococcus, getting into some big words here. Cryptococcus neospormans can go to meningitis. Pharmaceutical corn, Oleca soybeans, pyrithium. I mentioned pyrithium. There are a few gals in the audience here, and you have it. Pyrithium, what is it? Pyrithium is a daisy. A daisy? Pyrithium? Some daisies, some flowers, some seeds, some plants develop, manufacture their own insecticide. And I just saw a brief advertisement on a TV when I was on the West Coast here recently, just last week. It caught me by surprise, but here comes this little whisper of a milkweed pod floating through the air. I can't even tell you the name of the company that's sponsoring this herbicide. But this seed goes over and drifts underneath this plant, of which the ground is nude around it, but this plant is growing. This plant provides its own herbicide, broadleaf. If somebody knows that name, they can recite it.
Callisto.
Excuse me?
Callisto?
I think that's probably right. I begin to see. I just caught the name very quickly, and I didn't even have a chance to write it down. Pyrithium is a plant, the daisy, Tasmania, island of Tasmania, American cyanamid. Several years ago sent us a sample that says, how do you harvest this stuff? Don't expect to keep the seed because we've already neutralized it. When you've finished analyzing it, please send it back. Tasmania is an island south of Australia. How many people use off? We all do. That ingredient created by pyrithium is in your off. Now, let's go out and harvest it. What do you do? Where's the precautions? What are the precautions? The people that harvest it have to stay in the cab of the combine. The people that are loading the trucks wear air suits. Because if you don't, and you get into the dust, this insecticide begins to eat around on your skin, in your hands, because it's trying to get upon you as it is the insect, as a repellent. Oleka soybeans. There was 4,000 acres planted in the state of Iowa last year. This year, there's somewhere, it could be up to 12 to 14,000 acres. I was there to assist DuPont Pioneer in how do you sanitize your combine. There were several contracts from different growers having different machines, red, green, yellow. We were there. But until about 7:30 this particular morning, this individual mentions amphotericins within this soybean. Now, that's some bad shit. Anybody been bitten by a snake, rattlesnake?
I paid for them.
You've paid for it. If you've been around someone that's got bitten by a rattlesnake, near the puncture mark, the muscle touch tissue will disappear and dissolve, goes away. Amphotericin will do the same thing. And I'll get back to it later as we get into this because I had a personal experience. The Oleka soybean actually is a petroleum replacement. There's a Dr. Ornery, that's his name, the University of Iowa up at Waverly has got and holds the patent to it. Currently, he's supplying the hard grease to the Iowa Interstate Railroad. This grease has reduced their rolling stock effort 15%. This may sound funny, but they do it. They grease the rails with this processed soybean. Now they don't lubricate the face of the rail, they lubricate the side of the rail. We've got several hundred thousands of miles of railroads in this country, and can you imagine lubricating every mile of it? Well, the big boys aren't going to do it. They are lubricating the curves. As you get out in the rural countries, you can find these little brushes scattered along the inside of the rail on the Santa Fe and Great Northern Railroads, just to name a few. Some of you someday may get mixed up in harvesting some material for a government regulation, or excuse me, a government facility. And they will have regulations that require you to have non-fossil fuels or lubricants in your machine. Bingo. Currently, there are some government agencies in northern Iowa that is using this material as diesel fuel, hydraulic lubricant, their greases, and their engine oils. It's still in the development stage, and most of the hard greases that the university is providing comes out and goes to the hard greases. It's very expensive at this time. But the Japanese will allow this commodity to be imported into their country. One of the few that's a GMO altered seed. The Pacific Rim will accept it, but not the European market. As we got into the sanitation of these machines, or the discussion thereof, at 7:30 over breakfast, this fellow mentions amphotericin. The sirens go off inside me, and I said, "Do you understand what this stuff is?" And he said, "Well, it does rearrange the structure, the molecular structure of yeast or funguses. And so it can hurt you. If you get an injection of it, it will destroy your muscle tissue at the injection point. It is used chemically and in chemotherapy applications. And that's been in the business for, as long as I've known, 15 years. Just recently, I got a phone call from California out of a rice growing area, and somebody wants to grow soybeans. Where do I call someone that can tell me how to raise soybeans? This is a dealer calling me. And so I put him in touch with several growers and a couple dealers to get the straightest poop on equipment. But I thought about it for some moments, and I came back to him and I said, who is doing this? And he said, I don't know. So you better go find out. It could be this Oleka soybean, and we don't want it in the food chain. And that's a warning to these growers. We do not want this seed in the food chain. Period. It's because of this makeup of amphotericin that can rearrange the genetic cells of these spores, these molds, funguses. Somewhat similar to carnal bunt. Carnal bunt won't hurt you, but amphotericin B will. What the cryptococcus that this person was injected with or had in their body these spores generate or reproduce by budding. And budding is, it looks like a satellite. You know, the little bugs come around and then they kind of float off into space. And in doing so, they just keep multiplying, multiplying, multiplying. Where does it come from? Where does this stuff come from? It comes from pigeons. Or the relative thereof. You hear people when they tear down a little depot or a barn, get a respiratory problem like pneumonia, but they never get over it. More than likely, it's this spore that's gotten into their lungs, and it takes a long time for it to disappear. It's so uncommon that a lot of people miss it. Between 200 and 300 people a year in North America contact this stuff. And 75% of that number is usually through the lungs. But there's 25% of this number gets it in their brain. They don't know how it gets there, but it arrives. And we think that it arrives through their nose and not their mouth. How long does it take to materialize? About 2 to 4 years, best estimate. How do they detect it? Spinal taps. Goes into a centrifuge. If the specimen is bad enough, it looks like alcohol mixed with water. Take pure alcohol, put a drop of water, and you watch the alcohol cascade down through the sample. That's what this stuff looks like. How do they test for it? India ink. India ink will cloud your white cells in your bloodstream, but this cryptococcus, he don't. It's so thick that the natural immune system in the body can't take care of it or attack it. And so we use this amphotericin B to rearrange its genes, its makeup, so that the natural processes within the body attacks the cell. And so we don't kill the spore per se, we just rearrange its structure so it can be gotten rid of. Takes a long time. Pharmaceutical corn. Has anyone harvested it yet? It's around. It is around. I think most of us have seen or heard of the butterfly with the pollen on the TV a couple years ago. Okay. Well, I can imagine if this stuff starts to float around, it'll all get pretty high, huh? And those people don't have to worry about dust, roots, seed. Can't leave it on the ground for the wild animals, much less you or I. As we got into these situations, I'll slip back here for a moment to talk about the Oleka soybean. Was to sanitize our machine before, yep. But the real emphasis is after harvest. Typically, we catch all kinds of hell from these growers and providers of foodstuffs if we don't have the machines properly cleaned before we go to the harvest. But with this stuff, this soybean, is the sanitation is to occur after harvest. And you've got to prove it. So in a few minutes here, I'll show you some of the hidden spots in our machine and some of the new things that we've added to our machine to assist in removing of unwanted or seeds, bugs, diseases, or whatever. But that was part of this meeting in Des Moines, to alert these people working for Pioneer who had never seen our machine, red, green, or yellow, is to show them where these spots were, because these are the inspectors. They were armed with leaf blowers and also to assist the growers, if need be, on how to sanitize their machine after harvest. And then the proof of thereof of a flush. I'm not talking about water or flushing the machine. I'm talking about you're going to go to a rogue seed. It could be another field of soybeans, corn, wheat, whatever. And you're going to go out there for about 100 to 200 yards, come back, and destroy the seed. Now, how do we destroy it? I can grind it and feed it to cattle, or put it in some container and burn it. Or, again, most of them said they would probably go to a cornfield because of rotation of corn and soybeans, and they would allow that to be fed to cattle, ground up and fed. We don't have to heat it, but we could get rid of it that way. The container has to be retained so that these inspectors can see it. After they see it and can guarantee that you flushed the machine and so forth, they'll give you $75. A little bit different. Has anyone heard of this Oleka soybean? You go over here around Harlan, Iowa, and you'll see it. It's there. There's another spot at Oskaloosa, Iowa. It's southeast of Des Moines. There's another spot of it over there. I tell you this because that's where we had our meetings, or where these people came from to Des Moines, that we spoke as a group. Individual companies spoke to their own contracts so that we could dwell within the machines, tell you where these spots were and how to be careful. And then Pioneer and DuPont took over and showed them how to contact them. They had several people that canvassed the area. And not only were we concerned about the combine, but they also were concerned about the planter, the auger cart, and the truck. Or anything that touched that grain had to be inspected after harvest. And the clean out of machines, how long does it take? Again, these people that are attempting to write these standards or regulations are trying to get us as equipment providers to guarantee if we do something for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, we can guarantee so many percents of something else has been removed from, or not something else, but the seed's been removed from the machine. That's a hell of a guarantee. Because what if I use a whisk broom for an hour? He could probably still have 100% of the seeds encapsulated, and that machine's still there. But he went around with a whisk broom. Did an exercise, and along with Colonel Bunnick, did an exercise last fall for Frito-Lay. For my own edification, how long does it take to sanitize a machine, and when I get finished, is all the seeds gone? That was the question. And in the process, how much grain am I going to be getting out of the machine? We spent 4.5 man-hours getting rid of the seeds, we thought. We got about 2 to 3 bushel of grain out of the machine. Now this exercise, we just pulled away from the truck, drove to a machine shed, had high volume air, some leaf blowers, and started to clean the machine, including the corn head. Back to the patch, we went about 10 feet, shut it down, and get in the grain tank, and we still found 2 seeds. We continued to watch for the next several moments to see if we had any more of these rogue seeds in our sample, and that was the only 2 seeds that I found during this exercise. In talking with Illinois corn growers several months ago, they asked about tolerance. How much tolerance are you going to allow when you go from one seed to another? And knowing about amphotericin and its potentialities, I said 0. Then they came back and said, well, can you explain how much material has been removed, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? No, I can't. And at the end of that, I still have to say 100% or 0 tolerance is all we can expect in this industry. If we're to survive to move our grains to these foreign markets, just like Colonel Blunt. And so the guidelines, the standards and so forth are going to be very hard to write, and I don't know if they'll ever get there. I'll give you a little story. An acquaintance of mine in Brazil. We're at a factory down there, we're at our cafeteria. Some of you may have already heard this story a couple times, but anyway, I asked my engineering buddy, would you go out there in the cafeteria and get me some of them red beans? Because they're, you eat them for breakfast, dinner, lunch, supper. It's a very strong staple in the country of Brazil. They look like pinto beans up here, although the color's reversed. We tease them because it's from down under. Anyway, he comes back very proudly with this partial sack of these red beans, because we're going to have a little study on grain quality this day. He thrusts the sack at me, and I say it's contaminated, I cannot use it. Vega looks at it and he goes, he didn't say anything wrong with it. He begins to take it back in the direction towards me again. I said, I'm sorry, Vega, I can't use it. It's contaminated. He didn't say anything wrong with it. But guess what I saw? In a sack of red beans, if you can imagine the cover of this chair, in the seam of the cellophane bag, there was a yellow kernel of corn. Look at me right in the eye. Honest to God. That's the contamination we're talking about when we get mixed up in these fancy seeds. Not only was it contaminated with corn, but we rolled it over and there was a black bean and a white bean. Now, I wouldn't think that kernel of corn and these other 2 seeds were mixed into that pod the moment those seeds came off the plant. And he said, now I understand. And he said, you know, truthfully, what I thought you were talking about, contamination, was a bug. And contamination can be a rogue seed of some other seed. It can also be the seed within the same plant. Such as this will look a soybean, they look the same. They don't look any different. So, I'm kind of asking if you guys, and I'm making a statement as an industry, when sometimes you get mixed in with these finite seeds, or these unfamiliar seeds, like this deal in California, we're still going to watch it. All they want to do is keep the oilseed plant busy next door, but we still think there could be an underlying statement here, because somebody may be moving into that area because it's has been so divorced of soybeans that it may be a natural for some of these people with some of these fancy structured crops to move in there and begin to raise them. So I'm throwing it out for you people, is to be careful. And if you get wind of some new seed moving into an environment that you're traveling through, ask the question, what is it? And make sure where it's going. I've had people with food products don't even know what company it's going to. 2 days later, call on the phone and said, I just got 2 semi-loads of popcorn rejected. What am I going to do? That can happen to you people. I've seen grain rejected because of cracks, too many cracks, color, smell. That truck episode of being smelly happened in Menominee, Wisconsin several years ago, of a truckload of fancy red kidney beans that came from North Dakota. I walk in the scale house this particular morning, it was very blue in there, not from smoke. But just the attitude, these people, somebody was very disgusted at the fact that they had something wrong with these beans. I could smell it. They didn't have to tell me what it was. I got me a nice cup of coffee. I sat down in this fancy office to see what was going to happen. It didn't take very long. Finally, I had a big bowl of this stuff thrust under my nose, and Russell says, have you ever smelled this before? And I said, yes, sir, I have. What's it smell like to you? Swamp water. Now, where did the smell of swamp water get into edible beans? Since they just left North Dakota the night before, and now they're in Wisconsin the following morning. The trucker stopped in Minneapolis for an overnighter. They had 1/10 of an inch of rain. Cindy went out and got a sample out of the truck. Happened to be in this one spot. She took a dip, went in, boiled them off 20 minutes, and that's when the odor arose. That was the discussion, not to accept the beans. Very heated discussions occurred on the telephone, and they eventually unloaded them, but they took a lot of precautions. They probed every square foot by grid. They probed around where this dipping of the bowl had occurred, and never found it again. But they did subdivide the truck in half with some plywood and removed the back half of the truck and put the front half into another set of containers so it could go on into market. But this back half was accepted under protest and put in a separate portion of kept separately from the rest of the inventory. Somebody had some intelligence and said, okay, let's unfold the tarp. And guess what they found? At that vicinity there, the tarp had a little fray to it. A little, not quite, no hole. But the fabric was fuzzy. Container of water, it sat there and dripped for a couple hours. Cindy happened to get up there and just take a dip. And that's how fussy some of this stuff can get and how testy these people can be. So with that, I'm going to dim the lights here. Sure, it's a red machine. I'm going to take you through some spots to watch for and show you some changes that we've made at our machine. And these things have been picked up as an industry throughout the world. So these are the different pages. This happened to be the little folder that I used in Des Moines. Simple areas. Clean the header. This happened to be for soybeans. We go off into other areas. It could be some other type of edible bean. But drop the header. Corn heads. We can probably get about half a bushel out of corn head. And don't forget the areas. You just see the arrows pointing around to the different ledges that this stuff can hide. We probably spent about an hour and a half on the corn head before we took it off the combine. Up Upon separating it, some of these rogue seeds can get trapped in crevices, particularly between the feeder house and the back of the headers. We next then moved back behind the drive tires and we covered up the fan. Got up into the grain tanks. We've got a couple of pet areas here that the grain actually can sprout in sometimes, and it smells good enough to drink if you don't keep it clean. And so 2002, our machines and the machine upstairs, we've got some plastic covers in there as standard equipment to block off this area so these rogue seeds that get wet don't get trapped there, and when the grain tank cleans out at the end of each dump, this collection is no longer there. Auger troughs. 2002, we've added some clean-out holes for aiding in sanitation of the machine. You can look at the machine upstairs, you'll see little doors into the auger trough. There's a couple arrows pointing down, and we got little doors. You loosen the hardware and just rotate it out of the way. There's a pair of 3/4 inch holes behind those two plates that you can put in air holes in there, and you will blow the material over towards the sump, helping you remove the seed, dry seed, out the bottom. On top for our auger, rotor housing, we've got a pretty good ledge up there that can trap a lot of fuzzy stuff, being dirt and grains. Leaf blower works real good in this area. Same way back, that previous picture was a concave area, this is a grate. We start up in the feeder house. A lot of people forgot about the little crannies in behind. We got a deflector plate there, as most machines do. Rock traps. Previous picture was with it closed. Now we've opened the door. We have an auger bed. In front of the auger bed is some doors, and they're a pain in the ass to get to. Yeah. The seed people, the seed industry has already modified some of their machines, and they've got them down to a quick click and go. Even back in the discharge area, this happens to be a picture of a chopper, but we have machines equipped with beaters, red, yellow. We all have some form of discharging material, straw walkers and so forth. Sieves. Sometimes we don't have to pull them. We get in some grasses and some small seeds. We are required to remove the sieves. Some of our fancy gadgets and gadgets for monitoring moistures. The units used to collect the weights up in the top, our little spring scale up there at the end of the elevator. We got to pull it out because seeds get trapped up there. This happens to be the moisture tester. Also, down in the elevator area in 2002, we've also added two little doors, air doors, that we could put a nozzle into the lower auger troughs for the tailings and clean grain. Some of the seed people have gotten fancy enough. The connecting bands between the side of the machine out to the elevators, they've got over-center latches or clips or clamps of some form. They've gotten rid of the bolts. They've reduced their efforts or timeliness to sanitize the machine by taking these bands off. This happens to be clean grain on a 2388. This is the tailings. Showing the clamps where they're in place there. It's to remove them, exposing the auger. Some people have gotten fancy enough that underneath the cross auger, that trough is hinged in a couple bolts and it falls away, so the under portion of the machine is exposed to get rid of the seeds. I've got some handouts. Yeah, I produced them. But there's some guidelines in there. It's about 1.5 pages long. If where you at, Tony? Could you give me a little hand? And maybe the guys here in the brown sweaters. I've got a pass out here if you want to just kind of go through the crowd for you. It's right here in the over there. This I'm going to quickly go through here. It's about a page and a half long. It's only a set of guidelines as I've collected from the industry, be it seed, soybeans, or hybrid seeds. Again, it's just a set of suggestions and ideas. The use of the leaf blower is very handy. I get involved in one of these exercises. I have a portable one. It gives you a large volume of air that you can clean the machine. About a third of the way down on that front page, there's a heavy notation there. It says, "Do not use water." Why, the damn seeds will stick to the water, and now you got a real mess. So, but there is some seeds that will allow you to use water. One of them is hybrid rice, certifying for seed rice. They'll let you use water there after the machine has been sanitized. And you have to guarantee you did it for 1 day. And then you soak the machine with water, much like you guys will do with your hot water and bleach solutions and so forth. And then the machine is to set for 1 day while the seeds germinate, and that will kill the seed. That's part of the sanitation portion for hybrid and certified rice seed. Make auger troughs accessible, add auger covers. Interesting here, some people have to go behind the RAS bar supports in all the machines to get rid of the dirt and collections that can occur there. We did an exercise last year. We found that we can use this foamy stuff. You can get one that does not expand, and you get 1-time expansion, 2 and 3-time expansion. The 3-time expansion is the least expensive, but it just keeps growing, and it takes about 10 hours for it to stop effervescing. Careful, Baker. Towards the last part, on into the page there, as we get into the edible bean part, some of these exercises will ask you to leave all the doors and shields open, and you'll run 100 yards, walk back behind the machine, and see if there's any rogue seeds. It's really easy to see if you're in white beans or red beans, and see if there's any other colored beans or off-colored beans that's behind the machine. It's an indication that you've not sanitized very effectively. You may have to start over if somebody catches you. Then you have to close it up, engage the unloading auger, which I failed to mention on that first pass. Also, it's running. No seeds are to be trapped within the machine or retained. Go the second time when the door is closed. Unloading auger is still engaged. Second person riding in the seat, buddy seat, learner's seat. Make sure he's got the seat belt fastened. He's to turn around and watch in the grain tank and see if he sees any rows of seeds come in there as you go the second span. If you don't see any, then he can swing the unloading auger back, shut it off, continue on for another couple hundred yards, and you get out and crawl in the grain tank with the engine shut off and see if you find any off-colored seeds. If you don't, then you can continue on until you get the first dump or so, 50 bushel, depending on who the people are that you're delivering to or what the customer wants you to do. Then you take this first dump and you go put it in a separate truck, wagon, bag, whatever. I've seen it happen time and time and time again. Okay. Some of these exercises in sanitizing machines gets to be rather involved. And some of them we can find as least as 4 hours and up to 10 hours it takes to sanitize a unit. It's expensive, yeah. but it's a hell of a lot less expensive than if you had a load of grain rejected. Especially if you're in pure South Dakota, out there in the reservation when you're about 62 miles away from the hotel. And those first trucks head for Holyoke, Colorado. You got to be very careful with that first truckload, don't you? Because you don't want to have to bring it back home. And so we have to make sure that that first truckload has no rogue seeds in it, because they know when they seem to sense when at the scale house when you guys change circles. I have no idea how that telegraph works, but they seem to know. Those trucks are the first two trucks are usually the ones that really get scrutinized. That once you prove that there's no rogue seeds in these samples, then the sampling becomes easier, quicker, and the truck's turnaround time is a lot faster. Exercise in pure South Dakota, depending on the machine and how dirty it was, we spent 6.5 man-hours per 4 machines. We started 8 o'clock and we didn't cut the first lick of grain or harvest any grain until 4 o'clock that afternoon. The customer accepted it, no complaint, because he didn't want to end up with a couple truckloads of grain rejected back on the farm. So with that, I'm going to close. There is another meeting here at 4 o'clock, so I got 14 minutes. But in summary, be careful what these seeds are. If somebody asks you to do something different or out of the ordinary on a particular seed, don't be afraid to ask questions. Because once you get involved with this and the certain answers come back to you and the sirens go off inside, you better stop. And really the first thing that we have to be concerned of getting involved with some of these things is our own mindset. Once we get there, it's kind of easy. But for these first timers getting in some of these commodities, being asked to sanitize before and after, may not be used to that. But you guys as a whole probably are the easiest to talk to about sanitation because of the regulations going from one state to the other. Be it for cardinal bugs, weed seeds, and so forth. There may have to be some extra steps even within a certain state if you get mixed up with some of these pharmaceuticals and some of these other plants that can produce some of these ingredients that may not be too healthy to eat. So be careful, watch your fields. If you get in trouble and you're getting into something new, get a hold of us. We'll probably help you understanding possibly what seeds you're getting into, because the industry, we are there, have been there. Is there any questions?
Doesn't really pertain to sanitizing, but on IT grains, like how effective is it to run 50, 100 bushels through for the rogue seeds? And not,
You're asking,
I do some identity preserved grains.
Okay.
And the general procedure is open the door, shake them off, run 50 bushels through it, dump it as regular grain, and then do the IT grains. I haven't had anything come back on me, but I was wondering how effective is that for the rogue seeds?
there's still these potentials for these rogue seeds to get entrapped. Usually, or we found in some cases, it's not an exact study, but we've noted that if we run the machines empty and go to a different seed and flush the machine, it's not quite as... after the second or third dump, we don't see the rogue seeds coming back. But the seed's still in there if you go look for it. And so I still come back and say 0 tolerance. I'll come back for a second here too. September, some of you are leaving, but September 11th, do you remember that date? Well, that was the day I was having breakfast with this guy with Pioneer at 7:30 in the morning when he made that statement to me. And my involvement with the amphoterus and the Cryptococcus neosporum meningitis, and I am not a chemist, I'm not a biologist, although it was a hell of a biology study, began September 26, 1985. I found out about Cryptococcus on September 29th. That happened to be a Sunday. The 30th of September, I found out what amphotericin B was. And the injection of this amphotericin B had to be so careful that there was only 2 people in this hospital capable or qualified to inject a person with this, because you can't get it in the muscle tissue, it disappears. During the intravenous feeding, you're going to watch the individual's veins change. It's rejection, it doesn't want it. The veins in your hand will swell up the size of a pencil or larger. 82 days later, we thought, and through tests, after 13 spinal taps, we were cleared. That stuff was $400 a shot. Expensive scotch. Lots of things happened. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but my wife contacted the Cryptococcus. And so after 82 days of these injections, we finally got the clearance to go home. So my words to you are, be careful. With that, thank you, and we'll see you and have a good trip home.
As Dave said, I'm a regional program manager with USDA, APHIS, PPQ in Fort Collins, Colorado. I want to thank you first for inviting us here to tell you a little bit about Carnal Bunt and educate you further as our new regulated area cropped up in Texas. I believe this is the first time that we've been invited to one of the National Harvesters Association meetings. We appreciate it. A little bit about my background and my knowledge of Carnal Bunt. I was born and raised in Wyoming and started in PPQ doing grasshopper programs and biocontrol, and moved on from there to California, working the Mexican border. And then when Carnal Bunt was first discovered in Arizona in '96, I was one of the first group of people that went to Arizona 10 days after the discovery and helped. I worked in the field working with a lot of the harvesters and conducting the sampling that first year, and then I stayed. I worked strictly on that program for 3 or 4 years, and then moved on as a operations support officer in Arizona, and last June went to Colorado when our regional office moved back to Colorado. That's a little bit of my history with KB. I want to mention that there's some handouts up here that Bart Smith will be referring to a little bit later. After, there may be some handing out now, but after we're done, you can pick them up here. Go ahead and click to the first one. We have a APHIS homepage and on the web, and if you go into www.aphis.usda.gov, there's a bunch of programs on the right-hand column, and Carnal Bunt is one of them. Click on Carnal Bunt, you'll get to the Carnal Bunt homepage. In there it has a lot of documents on the background of Carnal Bunt, some questions and answers, updates. We are hoping it may have gotten on there today, in the very near future, if it's not already there. We're going to put up there our Carnal Bunt manual that we've just in the tail ends of finalizing right now. We have maps up there that show the current regulated area, and then different maps of our national survey from year to year. And then to a certain extent, relative to the CFRs, it has some operational procedures. This map here shows, right now, has 2001, it has the new fines in northern Texas, but this will be what we're going into next year with the regulated area. The dark is the actual regulated area. The lighter color is the entire county that regulated area falls into. But it's just the dark that is considered a regulated area. What is Carnal Bunt? I'm going to go through these real brief, real quick, and get to some of the sampling procedures that you guys will be dealing with. It's a fungal disease of wheat, durum wheat, and triticale. The primary source of spread is through infected seed. The infection occurs during the flowering stage of the wheat, and the infection is very weather dependent. There's no health risk to it. It's a grade and quality issue at higher infection rates. It takes a multitude of spores to start an infection. The research is not really definitive on how many. If we knew exactly how many, it would maybe help us in some of our efforts. That type of research is very difficult to come by. And then because of its weather dependent, it's hard to predict. Next slide, please. Go ahead, Mom. Why do we, actually I think we skipped one. Yeah, this one shows a life cycle of Carnal Bunt. The spores are soil-borne or in the soil, and as rains and irrigation, humidity comes forth, they get splashed up onto the plant, and if everything is right at time of flowering, the spores infect the flower, and then it eventually gets to the seed kernel, and you can see as it comes around, it develops in the kernel, and then if that bunted kernel breaks, it deposits the spores into the soil again. On the top here is several development stages of bunted kernels. On the left you have a very slight tip infection, and then on the right you have what we call a canoe, where those spores and that fungus has ate out the majority of the seed. On the bottom you have a slide picture of what the spores look like. They're similar to a lot of other smut spores, but there are some differences. Why does USDA regulate Carnal Bunt? I said it's not a health risk. It's it should be a grade and quality issue. We agree with that. The problem is that 77 countries consider it a quarantine pest. We have to certify, to maintain the wheat exports in the country, we have to certify area freedom. And we, if wheat's going to certain countries, we have to write phytosanitary certificates with an additional declaration, and this varies a little bit between these 77 countries, but the basis behind it is the wheat in this shipment comes from an area where carnal bun is not known to occur. Until we can convince, or until these other countries take it off of their quarantine pest list, we have to certify it and demonstrate carnal bun-free areas in order to maintain the entire country's export markets. To do that, we have sampling and procedures in the regulated area, and we also have national surveys. The national surveys we initiated in 1996. Several of the states, Kansas being one big one, basically surveyed for carnal bun prior to that. In that time, there's only been two, not counting Arizona where we found it initially, but since '96 there's only been 2 times when carnal bun's been discovered. And one of those was in a national survey sample in San Saba, Texas, and this latest one was a bun and kernel found in a elevator that was submitted for sampling. Actually, I kind of went over real quick just now the history. March 8, '96 was when KB was detected in Arizona. By April of '96, traced back and traced forward investigations, and basically by the time of harvest in '96, there's portions of Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas. This is West Texas that were under regulation. In '97, as a result of a positive national survey sample, San Saba County became regulated in central Texas. And then in June and July of this last season, 2001, Throckmorton, Young, Archer, and Baylor counties of Texas became regulated. A real quick history of some major program changes, at least relative to harvest and sampling. In '96, we sampled 100% of the wheat fields within the regulated area, and we sampled and tested them for spores. The combines, we had a contract to do those samples. The combines were required to sanitize between each field and each sample cut, and they were required to sanitize with bleach. And then in addition to that, 100% of the grain after it was harvested had to leave the regulated area, and that was also sampled for spores at rail cars and at trucks. In 1997, and then also it fell over into '98, we went to a bun and kernel standard for grain. There's no more sampling grain for spores. Seed still maintained a spore standard. And we went into a 2-tiered sampling scheme. We had the higher risk area, surveillance area, that was basically 3-mile buffer zone around fields where bun and kernels had been found, and then the entire county that those surveillance areas fell into was regulated for seed production. We sampled 100% of the wheat fields in the surveillance area and 15% of the wheat fields outside of the surveillance areas. Any seed production in either area was subject to our spore test and seed protocol. At that time, in '97, the combines were required to sanitize, not in between every field or every sample cut, but if they left the regulated area. We also added 2 other options in addition to bleach to the sanitizing protocols. One's hot water and detergent, 170 degrees, and the other is live steam at a point of contact temperature of 170 degrees. In 1999, we basically removed the area regulated for seed. We fell back after the harvest of '98. We fell back upon roughly a 3-mile buffer zone around the fields that where bun and kernels were found. This greatly reduced the size of the regulated area. It basically fell back onto the old surveillance areas. And made it simplified. We didn't have the 15%. We still sampled 100% of grain fields in that area. And again, we maintain that the combines leaving the area had to sanitize with one of those 3 options. In 2000, and the same in 2001, the major change were that the combines were not required to sanitize anymore unless they harvested or cut a positive field. This greatly reduced the impact on you folks from a sanitizing standpoint. If you didn't harvest any positive fields, you did not have to, there's no requirements to sanitize upon leaving the area. In 2001, in the new fines, a lot of the combines were required to do that, just because at the point that we found that KB existed there's a lot of fields that were not sampled, and as a precaution we took the most restrictive action there and required a lot of combines to sanitize upon leaving. Current sampling requirements for grain. This is what we basically have to maintain through the Code of Federal Regulations. 1 sample per field. It's a 4-pound sample. The sample results are known prior to leaving the field or at least offloading at a facility. Negative grain moves, it is certified as negative, and most of the areas are use local trip tickets as a mechanism and paperwork to move that negative, each truckload of that negative grain locally. Positive grain moves under a limited permit or a local equivalent. We safeguard the positive grain to a higher degree than any negative grain, so we make sure that we have some sort of a permit in place for the movement of any positive grain to an approved facility, usually a feed yard of some sort that in their general practice they send it through a heat treatment that devitalizes the spores. One more. There we go. Within those framework, we basically offer a couple of options. One is to take a sample right at time of harvest. This is basically as you guys come out of the field with your first load of wheat. We get a 4-pound sample and we take it to a nearest field lab and we process it for bunted kernels while you are continuing to sample. There's some drawbacks to this one on a small field, and if you don't have more than 1 truck, or depending on how many trucks you have, there is some delays, or maybe some delays depending on how much sampling is going on in the area. Another option that at least in Arizona it's worked very well, California I think uses it to a degree, the options there in the Texas areas to do this is to go in there earlier than the harvest. Cut 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of grain, and out of that amount of grain we take a representative 4 pounds out of that, and then we'll take that to our seed examination stations and run that sample. And basically one good way that this works is if a combine crew sends 1 combine in, and a few days up to 2 weeks, depending on how quickly you can or how early the grain matures, as long as you can get it through your combine, the science panels determine that if KB is there, we can detect it at that stage. You can go in a little bit early, cut several or all of the samples for the grower that you have under contract, at least in an area or however you choose and schedule to do it, and then we'll have the samples for you before you actually get in and start harvesting the fields. There's some drawbacks to that because you have, each field has this amount of grain, minus 4 pounds, to deal with. So there's some issues on that. There's pros and cons to each method. Go forward. Communication's critical. I have up here, and the next slide shows some local contact numbers of offices in each state where there's regulated areas. If you plan on going to a state where there's regulated area, or definitely if you're going into an area that you know is regulated, give one of these offices a call prior to going, let them know you're coming. They can get geared up on how many combine crews are going to be in their area. It helps them plan, it helps them get enough people in there to conduct the sampling. You can get local sampling protocols from them. You can get a list of facilities that would take negative or positive wheat. You get some, you can then know what the requirements are in case you have to and want to pre-plan on some sanitizing options. Get a hold of somebody that has a steam cleaner if you don't happen to have one, so on. So communication to the field is very critical. Here's the local offices. In Arizona, there's a couple of field offices also, but I've just listed the main offices. I don't have very many, but there's also a list of this up here. Leave that up for a second just to if you want to write it down. And that's basically it in a quick nutshell. I know that a lot of you folks have maybe gone to regulated areas. I know some of you operate in Arizona and have gone through this with us, helped us with this, and struggled through it with us. So now I think the main concern is the big questions are this new 4-county area in Texas. There's a lot of wheat up there, and so what I'm going to do now is invite Bart Smith up. He's going to be the project coordinator, or co-coordinator, I guess. He's going to get some help. And he's on site there in Olney, Texas. That's his office number. And he will address some local sampling protocols that they're going to use specific to there. It's very similar to what is used in San Saba County. It falls under the same guidelines pretty much, and real similar to California and Arizona. So Bart, and then we'll take questions after that.
I want to thank you first for inviting us. It gives us an opportunity to communicate with you, and even better, gives you an opportunity to communicate with us. And like Bruce said, communication is the secret to success for all of us. And we need to be fluid and open with that communication between your organization and our organization so that we can keep it moving that way. What I would like to say as far as the pre-sampling, we're in the process now working with FHA and some others there in the Alney project to see if we can locate 2 or 3 combines that maybe have got 12-foot headers on them, that would be machines that are available local, that would never have to leave the regulated area, whether they cut a positive field or not. But see if we can get those things under contract or by some method available to you for your use if you want